Hey there, brother friends and sister friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Heart Set Above podcast, a space where we try to help Christians faithfully and practically engage a world that is far from Eden. It's messy out here, and this podcast exists to help you stay grounded and hopeful and oriented upward in the middle of all the mess. I want to start by wishing you a happy new year, or maybe more accurately, a happy mom new year. Because while the world has been well into 2026 for over a month now, for this tired working mom, it finally feels like my year is just beginning. And I started wondering how many other moms out there feel the same way. Like the new year doesn't really start until closer to February 1st, once the kids are settled and routines are running, husbands are back at work, and we finally get a moment to exhale and say, okay, now I can begin my new year. So if that's you too, welcome. You're right on time. And I apologize that this episode didn't come out for the official new year, but it is perfectly timed for the mom new year. Today's episode is going to be just a little bit different. I wanted to take some time to give you an update on my life, on this ministry, on Heart Set Above, and to share where things are headed as we move into this next season. As many of you know, I began working in the space where faith meets sex, sexuality, and gender over 15 years ago. As a former lesbian who also wrestled with my own gender identity, I am uniquely familiar with this terrain. And for more than a decade and a half, I've had the deep honor of walking alongside individuals and families and churches in one of the most tender and often lonely spaces within the Christian world. And over those years, I've written a book for Christian parents navigating LGBTQ topics. I've spoken to churches internationally and faith based organizations. I've helped thousands of Christians and churches and families engage these conversations with greater clarity and conviction and compassion. And alongside that work, I also earned my master's degree in counseling, opened a private practice here in North Carolina, where I serve as a marriage and family therapist and a clinical mental health counselor. And in that role, I've helped individuals and couples and families deepen their intimacy, communicate more effectively, and heal patterns that keep them feeling stuck or disconnected. And so, living in both of those worlds at the same time, the ministry space and the clinical space, has really taught me a lot. And over time, a foundational worldview began to take shape, one that now governs all of my work in these tender areas. And out of that worldview, Heart Set Above was born. Now, Heart Set Above became a place where I could bring together some of those foundational frameworks and spiritual postures that I learned through years of faith based LGBTQ ministry. Things like navigating the messy middle or prioritizing connection over agreement and learning how to stay genuinely relationally connected without compromising conviction. And slowly, those truths that I learned in the LGBTQ space began to integrate with my training and experience as a therapist. And over time, Heart Set Above became a space where those same principles could be applied to any area of life. Now, for a long time, I believed that my primary calling was to speak specifically into the space where faith intersects with sex, sexuality, and gender. And while I remain deeply passionate about that work and continue to serve there, I've come to realize that my even deeper passion is actually to help people grow in their intimacy with God through every aspect of life, LGBTQ related or not, marriage, family, grief, faith, identity, all of it. I think at the end of the day, I would probably best describe myself as a kind of relationship coach, right? I teach people how to deepen intimacy, whether that's in their relationship with God, within their own inner world, with a spouse or child or friend, or even within a church or organization. My goal is always the same: to help people lift their eyes, to gain a greater perspective, and to live with a heart set on things above, even when doing so is uncomfortable or costly. One of the most common things I hear from people in my work with them is something like, "This is painful and challenging, but it feels true. It feels right." And honestly, I've come to see that as a sign that the work is doing what it's meant to. It's inviting people into growth, into surrender, and into deeper alignment with God. So at the moment, I've had a foot in several different spaces in the clinical counseling space here in North Carolina, in LGBTQ related ministry work through Strength and Weakness, and the broader spiritual formation work through Heart Set Above. I love all three, and I truly wish I had infinite time and energy to give fully to each of them. Which brings me to a more personal update. As many of you know, 2025 was a year marked by a lot of transition in our household. Early in 2025, our youngest son, Joel, was diagnosed with autism. And as if that weren't enough to adjust to, in September 2025, our oldest son, James, was diagnosed with ADHD and OCD. And if you don't know this already, I'm also married to a very brilliant man who also happens to have ADHD himself. So we often joke that I'm the only clinically sane person in our home. Though, of course, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know that's not actually true. May not be a name for what I have yet, but I'm confident that it exists. But truthfully, this year has been a lot for our family. A real adjustment, a roller coaster, honestly. And just as we started to feel like we got our feet under us with Joel's autism care, learning the rhythms and the therapies and the needs, James's ADHD began to flare in more noticeable ways. He started struggling in school, and things at home slowed down significantly because of his difficulty with focus and transitions. Everything began taking 2 or 3 times longer than I thought that it should, and that adds up quickly in a household. And so, thankfully, because my husband has lived with ADHD his entire life, we were able to recognize the signs fairly quickly and get a great team around James. We're still figuring out the right medications and tools and therapies. And like I learned with autism, there are no quick fixes. It's a journey, one that requires patience and flexibility, adjustment, and a lot of grace. I'm thinking I may record a separate episode at some point where I share more fully what the emotional journey has looked like with both my kids' diagnoses, in case that might be helpful for anyone walking a similar road. But for now, I'll simply say this. Not only has this been an emotional adjustment for our family, it's also been a very practical one. Day-to-day life tasks now take 2 to 3 times longer because of ADHD. Homework that takes my son's classmates 30 minutes is now taking my son about an hour and a half. And I'm there with him the entire time trying to help him through it. And the fact that my husband travels Monday through Friday for work, it's just me kind of single momming it during the week with my kids. Not to mention my 4-year-old autistic son in the other room needing my attention has just become untenable. All of that together has made one thing very clear. We need to scale back. Not because we've knowingly overfilled our plates. We're very intentional about how we structure our life and our time. But this season of life simply requires more margin, more presence, and a slower pace than the one that we were trying to maintain before. And the truth is, if I had a neurotypical partner and neurotypical children, I genuinely believe I could sustain my current pace professionally and personally. I could work during the day and take care of home stuff and kids stuff at night. But I don't have a neurotypical partner or neurotypical children. And the bandwidth required to do everything I've been doing is just simply more than I have. And truthfully, I've really grieved that reality. And I still do. I think in my grief, I've probably stayed in this space for too long, stretching myself thin, running my kids ragged in the hopes that if I just tried harder, it might change or get easier or somehow start working. But it hasn't. And over the last several months, I've found myself moving through all the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, sadness. And only recently have I caught a few glimpses of acceptance. I'm still mad about this reality. I'm still sad about this reality, but something is shifting. I'm beginning to notice a quieter, deeper invitation underneath the grief. I don't want to just keep things running in our home. I want to live. I want to be engaged and present in the day-to-day moments. I don't want my son growing up believing that the way his brain works was a hindrance to our family or to my work. I want him to know that we made room for it, that we adjusted around it, that he mattered more than efficiency ever could. And so after much prayer and wise counsel and real true mourning, we've decided that later this year, I will be stepping back for a season from one-on-one care, both through Heart Set Above and my counseling practice. This is a very sad decision because I genuinely cherish those moments with my clients. The partnership that we share in their refinement and growth is so sacred and special to me. This is also a very scary decision. I've spent the last several years building this practice and this nonprofit, and I just don't know what it will look like on the other side of a pause. There's a lot of unknowns there. And in the immediate, it's frightening in a very practical way. This work helps pay the bills for my family and makes possible much of what I do: speaking, teaching, writing, podcasting. There are a lot of unknowns in this step, and I don't know yet how this will all unfold. What I do know is this: I will continue teaching and speaking, recording trainings, hosting this podcast, and serving within Strength and Weakness, trusting that if God wants this work to continue, He will make a way to finance all of it. And as a family, we will be pulling back and adjusting, choosing for a time to live without my financial contribution and trusting that God will meet us there too. And so this season feels costly, uncertain, and deeply vulnerable. But it also feels faithful and refining. This season is about creating space for my family, for stability, and for God's work in all of us. So, though I will be stepping back from one-on-one care with my clients, teaching remains my first love, and I will continue to do that through speaking engagements, through recorded trainings, and also through this podcast. And I'm genuinely excited about what's ahead in that vein. I told a friend recently that I was a little worried about coming up with content during this break with my clients. I often get content ideas from meeting with clients, using what we discuss to extrapolate to a broader audience. But my friend said, Ellen, I think you'll find that with some space and bandwidth, it will be like a well bursting forth. Out of connection with God, you'll be able to speak and teach from that space. And honestly, I'm really hopeful for that. I think for a long time, much of what I've shared or taught has come from a place of having to get things done or share about a certain topic that's been requested. But I'm eagerly anticipating a reality where I can be more spirit-led in topics that I bring to audiences. During this season, I would deeply appreciate your prayers for our family, for provision, and for faith. I'm trusting God in very real, tangible ways right now. Just to name one of those realities, this podcast alone costs about $200 a month to keep running. And so God has already shown up with a beautiful provision that's already come through dear friends, Mark and Maureen LaFrance, longtime friends and faithful supporters. They've generously committed to helping cover part of the cost of this podcast. And so because of them, this podcast is now supported in part by their kindness and generosity. Mark and Maureen, thank you. We are deeply grateful. If anyone else feels led to support Heart Set Above, donation links are available in the show notes. Heart Set Above is a nonprofit, and so all gifts are tax deductible. So as we move into this next season, my hope is not to just keep things going, it's to live them more fully, to choose presence over productivity, to make room for what's slower and messier and more human, and to trust that God is just as at work in what we lay down as He is in what we build. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, for praying, and for walking alongside me in this season. This community matters more than you know. Wherever this year finds you, whether you're full of hope, deep in grief, or somewhere in between, my prayer is that you would sense God's nearness right there. Not rushing you, not asking you to perform, but just inviting you to be. Until next time, keep setting your hearts on things above, even when it costs something, and even when the fruit takes a little bit longer to see. See you next time.